I remember actually Joe Wright coming up to me. One of the first scenes we shot was with Dame Judi Dench. And I'd had dreams, actual dreams, about working with Judi Dench when I was a teenager, and I was suddenly in this scene with her. And we did a couple of takes, and it's the scene where she marches into the house in the middle of the night and wakes us all up. And we did about 4 takes, and Joe came over to me and very sweetly whispered in my ear, and he said, Carey, you actually need to do something with your face. Because I was just sort of staring at her, you know. The whole thing was just so, like, gormlessly, like, oh, Judi Dench.
But your parents were reluctant for you to go into acting. What was the reason for that, and how did you persuade them, or did you just not listen?
Oh, I didn't persuade them. Yeah, they were, you know, for all the reasons that you would imagine, you know, and the reasons that I now can rationally see are very good reasons. But at the time, yeah, they were very worried about it being a kind of unreliable job and a very disappointing one and a difficult one. So, yes, they weren't sort of that into the idea, and I tried to find my way, and I applied to lots of drama schools. I was rejected by all of them, and
idiots.
Well, I don't know. You know, I was like 17 years old and going into these auditions and doing Sarah Kane pieces about suicide and trying to be very deep, and had, you know, absolutely nothing to draw from. And I think, you know, they saw straight through me and quite rightly didn't let me in. And then I went on to sort of get my first job just after I left school. So that was sort of my way in.
Well, opportunity knocked for you when Julian Fellowes, the Downton Abbey creator, came to give a talk at your school, and you followed up. Tell us the story about how he was initially not so helpful, but then ultimately became helpful to your career.
Yeah, I said, I want to be an actress, and he said, well, marry a banker or a lawyer. And that was sort of it. And then after I was rejected by all the drama schools, I contacted him through my headmistress, and I said, you're the only actor I've ever met, and you know, I don't have any kind of route into this, and I think if I go to university, then I'll drop out, and that's a waste of time. So, you know, what advice can you offer? And he took me out for dinner with his wife and a lot of other people who'd obviously also written sort of these sort of letters, and they were amazing. They sort of recommended a brilliant workshop, theatre kind of television film workshop in London at Riverside Studios that I went to every week for about a year. And they also told me that there was an open casting happening, and that Gina J, who cast Pride Prejudice, her assistant was meeting lots of young girls who'd never acted before to play one of the sisters in Pride and Prejudice. So I went and met Robin, who was Gina's assistant, and did an audition tape. My first audition tape, which he very much coached me through, because I was doing a very big theatrical performance, and he kept on trying to he kept kind of making...
Do less.
Yeah, do less. And that turned into my first job.
And what a first job to have, 2005's Pride and Prejudice, directed by Joe Wright. You must have thought, oh, well, this is easy. You know, here I am, you know, with Keira Knightley, Judi Dench, all the rest. I imagine it was something of an educational experience for you as well, to be surrounded by all this great talent. You know, were you like a sponge back then? What did you learn?
Yeah, I mean, I had very little to do, and and that was the case for a lot of the jobs I did in the first couple of years. I was kind of supporting, and it was great. You know, the most extraordinary people in that film, Brenda Blethyn and Donald Sutherland and Keira and Rosamund Pike, and in a way they also became, Keira and Ros and Simon Woods and all those guys kind of became my year group, because I didn't go to drama school, so we were all, you know, kind of the same age. And but yeah, I just got to watch, you know, Judi Dench and all these extraordinary actors and actresses, and no one was focusing on me, and so I could make lots of mistakes and, you know, and just learn a lot.
You've mentioned not going to drama school there. Now, drama school teaches you a lot about the process and building a character. So I guess with the classes you had to sort of find your own way. Tell us how you set about building a character.
I didn't really have a way of working until... I mean, on Pride and Prejudice, I literally copied everything Jenna Malone did. I mean, to, like, everything. And the way that she laughed, I would laugh. And, you know, the way that she delivered a line, I just... thought, you know, I had no idea. I remember actually Joe Wright coming up to me. One of the first scenes we shot was with Dame Judi Dench, and I'd had dreams, actual dreams, about working with Judi Dench when I was a teenager, and I was suddenly in this scene with her, and we did a couple of takes, and it's the scene where she marches into the house in the middle of the night and wakes us all up, and we did about 4 takes, and Joe came over to me and very sweetly whispered in my ear, and he said, Carey, you actually need to do something with your face. Because I was just sort of staring at her, you know, the whole thing was just so, like, gormlessly, like, oh, Judi Dench. So yeah, it was a very, but so I didn't really have a way. I remember I had to cry in that film, and I didn't know how to, so I just thought about my mum dying. You know, I imagined terrible things happening to my family to make myself cry. And that's sort of how I worked for the first couple of years. I was just sort of making it up as I went along and didn't really know.
Well, one of those jobs you did in the first couple of years was a TV movie, My Boy Jack, and in that you have to, your brother is about to go off to war, and you're terrified about it. Now, around this time, your own brother was a captain in the British Army. So, was that an experience where you channeled your own feelings and put them into the role, or do you not like to go that close?
Yeah, I think it probably was. Yeah, I think it was. My brother had gone off to Iraq, and it was probably the closest I've felt in a lot of ways to some of the characters that I played. I mean, I very rarely have anything, you know, to draw from, thankfully, because some of the characters I played are awful, and so yeah, that was probably the closest to it. But it's funny, it's a really difficult, it sort of feels like such a long time ago. It's quite hard to imagine what it was like back then. But yeah, I think I did sort of have a lot of angst as well, that my brother was there at the time. And so it was a sort of odd experience.
Your breakthrough role on the international stage came in An Education. There were so many actresses up for that part. How did you set about winning the role?
An Education actually happened over a couple of years. It was originally, it had a terrible title originally. It was called The Time of Her Life, which sounded so dodgy when you watch the film. Anyway, yeah, so it was over, and it had a different director originally, and then that changed. And then at one point, some time had passed, and I was being seen for Helen, which is the role that Rosamund Pike plays instead. And then it finally came back round, and it was with Lone Scherfig. And then it all came together quite quickly, all in a couple of weeks, and suddenly it was happening, and maybe someone else dropped out. Looking back now, maybe that's what happened. And then we started shooting it. So it was all kind of a whirlwind getting into that film. And I did a number of auditions for it. So I think that was just a whittling down process.
And talking of whirlwind, what was it like going through awards season? I mean, your first sort of major movie as a lead, there you are, you're winning the BAFTA, you're nominated for sort of everything else. How do you look back on that experience now? What are your memories of it?
Oh, it was amazing. You know, I had no expectations for An Education at all, and didn't really know what Sundance was, and you know, found the whole thing quite overwhelming, and I really expected it to come out in the Curzon in London, and you know, for no one to see it. So it was amazing, and it meant that I suddenly was sort of very quickly elevated to a point where I was getting offered things. I'd never been offered anything before. I'd always auditioned a lot. And it opened the door for me to be able to do Never Let Me Go, which I did kind of straight after that. So it was amazing. I think I was a bit freaked out, and I probably took it way too seriously. And you know, I was really nervous all the time, and sort of, yeah, the whole thing was, you know, a big kind of change very quickly.
And talking of big change, you're then sort of whisked off to the United States, and you do a mega movie like Wall Street, Money Never Sleeps. So tell us what that experience was like to suddenly find yourself in the American movie big leagues.
Yeah, odd, you know, and brilliant at the same time. I mean, it was, again, another example, you know, it was sort of, I never would have had that in a million years before in education, and suddenly that was a possibility for me, and I was working with Oliver Stone, and, you know, that was kind of extraordinary. I think I kind of felt quite out of my depth at that point, and so looking back, I'm probably, I mean, I'm quite critical, but I sort of didn't really find my feet in that project quite so much, I don't think. But it was a great opportunity, and it kind of, you know, all these things sort of add up and give you the opportunities that you're looking for. So I really enjoyed the experience of making it, but it was challenging, and I was very, very kind of, you know, doing an American accent, and I hadn't quite figured it out yet, and it was lots of kind of, it was a bit of a battle for me, that one.
And you were balancing stage work in Broadway and the West End as well at this period. How important was it for you to go to the stage at this period rather than just do movie after movie?
I mean, the stage was where the roles were, really, and sometimes. I mean, when I did The Seagull when I was 21 in London at the Royal Court, and then did it on Broadway. And it was just my favourite experience of my career, and I mean, my very short career up until then, but I loved it so much, and I couldn't imagine finding another role like that I loved as much. And so when I did An Education, I had a conversation with my agent, Tor, and she said, you know, you're in this extraordinary position now briefly, and it might be brief, where people are going to offer you things, and it's an amazing privilege. But as long as you're in it, you mustn't take a role unless you can't bear the idea of anybody else doing it. And so that became my sort of way of working, that when I was offered things, if I kind of, the next day I'm not really thinking about it, or I think, well, it would be fine if so-and-so took that part, I've let it go.